Ladies and gentlemen, this is Nate Crespo, your host for today and forever, and welcome back to another episode of the Lawyers in the Making podcast, where it is my job to focus on the unique journeys to the law and law school of professionals in the legal field and law students. Let's talk about what we're doing today, because today we have another amazing guest. He is currently a rising 2L at the University of Arizona James Ed Rogers College of Law and currently works as a Student Entrepreneurial Fellow at Tech Launch, Arizona. He has held past positions as a legal intern at Life Plan Legal AZ and as a district manager at ADP. Excited to have him on the podcast today, Mr. Spencer May. Welcome to the podcast. How are we doing today? Before going any further, I'd like to say a quick word about the sponsor of this podcast, Rhetoric. Back in episode 25, I had the privilege of having the CEO, Luke Yingling, on the podcast, and ever since that episode, fell in love with the product. Rhetoric takes user briefs and motions and compares them against the text of opinions written by judges to identify ways to tailor their arguments to better persuade the judges handling their cases. Rhetoric's focus on persuasion and helps users find new ways to improve their odds of success through more persuasive arguments. Know more, win more. I was able to see a demo of the product, and its cutting-edge technology and fascinating features make for a product I am proud to sponsor, and further shows the new digital era the field of law has been entering thus far on my journey doing this podcast. If you decide to book a demo, let them know Nate sent you. Be sure to check them out in the show notes below or at userhetoric.com. One word, userhetoric.com. Now, back to the show.
I am outstanding. Thank you for having me, Nate. Appreciate the introduction.
Oh, no problem, no problem. And I had a mistake in the intro. The autocorrect has gotten me. It is actually James E. Rogers College of Law, not Ed, but it's all right. And we continue. And so, first, before we get started, Spencer, can you introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, Nate, I won't tell James E. Rogers that you mentioned his name. Well, first things first, Nate gave a quick introduction of me. I'm a law student at the University of Arizona down here in Tucson, and I'm interested in working with emerging companies. I'm interested in working in corporate work, but first and foremost, I am a husband, I'm a father, and I love doing the law.
Well, I love to hear that. I love so much love going on. But I love to hear when people love what they're doing. It's my favorite thing to hear in the world because it brings great happiness to me because I know it brings great happiness to you. Isn't that such a wonderful thing? But let's start. You were at Furman Young University. Shout out Jimmer Fredette. That's my guy right there.
Jimmer.
And you majored in political science. But before that, I have to ask, you were also a missionary of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, which is very interesting. So I have to ask, how did you get into that? And how did it sort of influence you as you have gotten here in your life?
Absolutely. So I was born and raised a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You'll hear us called Mormons, you'll hear us called LDS. But if you go just about anywhere in the United States, you'll find some of us. If you go into just about any bar association, you also find some of us. I think we're a little overrepresented in the legal community as far as like if you were to compare it to like our percentage of the population. For some reason, all of us like to become doctors, lawyers, and accountants. So I'm glad you asked about how that's kind of influenced, my path and leading to me to where I am today. Especially as as an LDS guy, a lot of our faith touches and encompasses so many parts of our life that I couldn't talk about like my personal and professional journey without mentioning the like implications that our faith has on it. A lot of what we focus on is like being good stewards of our, the gifts that are given to us by God, participating in families, being good members of the community. And those are all things that like you really have a platform to do as an attorney. And so that's something that I try to weave into everything that I do.
Well, I love that. And I had to come out swinging because I saw it and I was like, oh, I'm so interested. I have to ask about this. Now, throughout your college career, you were also the president of BYU College Republicans National Committee. You were there in Washington. And I have to ask, what were you doing in Washington? Because I saw that picture and it led me to ask this question. I was just so interested. There are so many interesting things on your profile, I have to say. So I'm going to ask about all of them. And I'll ask about this one here. What brought you to Washington?
Sure. Well, it may be a little more interesting in picture or in written form. I think you're referencing that like cringy selfie I have in front of the Capitol building on my LinkedIn profile. Um, yeah. So I initially when I enrolled at BYU, I thought that I was going to be a political staffer, be maybe like somebody's chief of staff. Like I was going to live like the West Wing dream. I believe Leo is the character's name who advises the president in the West Wing, and be a little less crass in doing it. But and so that led me into getting involved into like the politics scene at Utah or in Utah, and at Brigham Young University specifically. So I was the national committee man for the Young Republicans in the state of Utah. But what took me out to Washington, D.C. for a semester was interning at a political action committee in Alexandria, Virginia, in the waterfront, but everything that we did like happened in the capital.
Well, that is wonderful. That is exciting stuff right there. Now, you in 2020 started as an intern at the Disability Law Center. And what I find so interesting about this is a lot of people go into law school and they sometimes don't have prior legal experience, but you indeed did because you worked there. Then the next year you were an intern at the Utah County Attorney's Office, just like myself. I worked at a DA's office. It was a very fun time. I wouldn't work there, but I still had a great fun time. I learned tremendously. But can you talk about those experiences and how, looking back in hindsight, how they sort of influence your way of getting into law school?
Absolutely. I am so glad that I had those experiences. They were, for me, they were confirmatory. Um, we just alluded to like the fact that I worked out in Washington. I did an internship out there. Um, there was like verbal back and forth that I could have, turned that into a full-time position if I wanted to. But working in specifically in like political communications showed me that I didn't see a life there. Like that was not a life that I wanted to lead. On the other side of the coin, working at the Disability Law Center and at the Utah County District Attorney's Office, interacting with the attorneys there, seeing the work that they did, and really just getting to know like the kind of people that served in those roles and had gone through things that I was interested in doing myself. That was confirmatory. I was like, you know what, I could see myself as this person, or I could see myself living a similar life path, doing similar things on a day-to-day basis. So that's like kind of the one word that I would say is those experiences for me, those pre-law legal experiences were confirmatory.
So, like I said, I saw many interesting things, but there was one specific thing that I saw,
Oh,
and I love doing my research. I love finding things. You can't escape Nate. And Nate found that you had a side hustle. It was hashtag top secret to get your engagement ring. Now, I must ask, what was this top secret side hustle? And if you need to keep it and continue to keep it top secret, you absolutely can.
no, the top secret thing is just because this feels stupid to like really like list out as a job on LinkedIn. But I took a class in the first semester of my senior year at BYU, and the entirety of the class was to start a business, and your grade on like an A to F scale was based upon how much money you made in that semester. So to get an A in that class, you had to generate $10,000 in revenue. Um, I can go into like the most minute detail of what I did, but suffice it to say, I bought and sold stuff on Facebook Marketplace, got rich guys to open up their garage and pay me a commission to sell their things, including like rolling ice cream machines, Hobart like industrial restaurant mixers, um, let's see. The biggest I think transaction I did was like a set of motorcycles. Like it is the silliest thing that I'll ever tell you, but suffice it to say, I got an A in that class.
I mean, that first I have to say that's the craziest class I've ever heard in my entire life. Like that, the fact that even exists is like I think amazing. Like I think that gives people such amazing skills. I mean, skills that can transfer to literally anything. So first, class is amazing. Second, the idea you came up with is also amazing because the Facebook Marketplace, I love it very much. Everything in my new apartment in Albany all from Facebook Marketplace. My roommate, like literally, goes on Facebook Marketplace for hours at a time. My office chair is Facebook Marketplace. Our kitchen table, our kitchen chairs, everything in our house is basically from Facebook Marketplace. So I think you hit on a diamond in the rough there in terms of getting an A in that class, going down that route, because it was an amazing thing. But you then were at ADP, you were an associate district manager, you were living the dream in the cubicle farm. And then you became a director of franchise support and a district manager at ADP. But eventually you left all that. You decided to go to law school. So, with that experience in mind, simply put, Spencer, why'd you go to law school?
I went to law school because I wanted to be an attorney.
That's, I mean, best answer I could have had. Short, sweet, simple. That's what I love to hear on this podcast. And what's so great about what we have here is you just went through your first year of law school, so it's in the mind and it's detailed and you got everything in there. And I love talking about the first year of law school. Some people love it, some people hate it, some people say it's the best year of their life. How was it for you?
It was a blast. Another way that I would say it would be a roller coaster experience. Um, Everybody's got their one else stories. Mine, I think, was a little more interesting than some. We were lucky enough to actually welcome our first newborn child in September. I was sitting in contracts class, and my wife gave me a call and said, "You will not be finishing this class. I'm in labor." And so navigating starting law school in a new place as a new family was an interesting experience, but I wouldn't trade the last 12 months for anything.
So how was that having that newborn child and going through this year of law? I mean, it's such an interesting perspective. It is such a unique journey, I may say. I had to put the tagline in there, but it is such an interesting perspective to have. So what sorts of things did you do to ensure that you were on top of your work, but also taking care of the newborn child that just came into this world? And I have to say congratulations, as I always congratulate people on such an amazing thing. I hope to have a family myself one day, so I'd love to hear that. But how did you manage everything throughout your first year of law school with all the things that were going on?
The short answer is, Nate, I didn't. The long answer is, though, first and foremost, my wife is a superhero. Sage, who will probably never hear this interview, but I'm gonna praise her anyway. Um, she has been a mother. She's the oldest of four kids. Practically raised some of her siblings. Is the oldest grandchild, the oldest cousin. So she's been babysitting since like she was no longer being babysat. Came to second nature to her. So first and foremost, like I really rode my wife's coattails. And I think that's going to be the case for anybody that's enrolling in law school because it's like so all consuming if you let it be that if you have a partner, there are going to be certain things that you're just going to have to lean on them for. Now you're going to have to decide what those negotiables and what non-negotiables are, but there are going to be certain balls that you try to juggle that during the first year of law school, you're just going to have to drop. And those were some of the lessons that I had to like learn through like an iterative process throughout. Um, but again, fortunately, I had my family and my faith to really like ground me. Um, and then outside of that, it was just, trying to squeeze in as much reading, um, exam preparation, extracurriculars and things like that as I possibly could without, sacrificing family and time for family and faith.
So you're doing all this juggling, but what are some specific examples of a time you remember when you're juggling all these things and you're like, okay, this one I can't juggle anymore. I gotta get rid of it.
Sure. So you're asking for thing like balls that I was trying to juggle that I had to drop. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
That's a super, super easy one. First and foremost, your health, mental and physical, super important during law school. I continued to work out, exercise during law school. But prior to law school, I had done a lot of, maybe not a lot for those that are really in the world, but I had done a decent amount of like running and races, whether it's half marathons, marathons. I had done some triathlon work, training, like regimented training programs that kind of went out the window. And for me in the first year, it was just like, okay, I gotta, I had a basketball group that I played with like one night a week. Went to the gym 1 or 2 days a week, tried to walk and run, stay active and not get, the freshman 50 or freshman 15. Um, but like serious physical race training, that was a ball I had to drop.
First of all, it's crazy that you're training for those things because those are certainly physical feats in themselves, but they're still very impressive. And it's a showing of your character. The fact that you can get through those things, have that strict training regimen and being able to execute it. And I guess how would having that strict training regimen, doing those triathlons, preparing for those marathons, how did that sort of translate to your time in law school in terms of having that regiment schedule, and how important was it that you were on top of everything? And were there any ways that you were sort of scheduling out everything, making sure that, you're on top of it all and you're all organized and all that stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head that like any serious undertaking is going to take some sort of like preparation in advance. At least to do it well and to do it right. So, having that background in planning out and doing some races, I understood what it was to like kind of have a flow and to have a set out plan and a cadence that you're following. In either marathon or triathlon training. I should add that that was a ball that I dropped in the first semester. Second semester, when our we were kind of like in a better groove, in a better flow as a family, I did do a triathlon out in Anthem, Arizona. So it's not something that I completely put away. I'm probably making myself sound a little more noble. I still had to scratch that itch. Um, but stepping into like hard and like concrete like law school things that I had to be regimented with and systems that I had to set up. For me, that was just like having a day. For me, it was Friday mornings because we didn't have any classes on Fridays. So Friday mornings, that was like a weekly planning day where, I just had all the upcoming assignments, um, reading assignments, and all the things that were going to be on my plate over the next 7 days. I would have that in front of me, either in digital or physical form. And that went on my calendar and it went into my Google Keep, which I made a LinkedIn post about. And it was funny, a bunch of attorneys were like, oh, this is so great, but like no law students reacted to it. So maybe I'm hallucinating, maybe that'll pay dividends in practice. Um, but yeah, just having like one place where I would pull things that I would be doing throughout the week in my calendar and, kind of like my running Google Keep to-do list. Those were the things that like kept me sane because I wasn't shuffling through like 5 different syllabi on every given day. That is the nice thing about law school is like so much of like your day to day is just given to you. Like you spend so much time in class, all your professors give you the reading assignments well in advance. Like it's not a mystery what you need to do. It's just being disciplined and being regimented and like honestly just like making yourself do it.
Oh, that's always the big thing. I know in my college career I've had those papers that I've had to write, and sometimes you just got to get on the computer and just start typing something, and then usually it just gets going. The hardest
Yeah.
part is always the start. It's
Yeah.
never it's never anything before that. It's just sitting down and doing it. It still happens to this day. I got to write an article, and I'm like, oh, what am I gonna write about? It's like, all right, let me just start writing, and maybe something will come up. If it doesn't, I'll go back. I'll try it again. So there's just so many of those instances, but it's always just most important to just start doing it. And so now I have to go back to you being a part of the Latter-day Saints and how that sort of had to influence throughout your first year of law school and how your faith had helped you get through that first year and make sure you're on top of everything and ensure that everyone is in tip-top shape.
Yeah, like I said, there's not really like I can't decouple, my faith from any aspect of my life. One thing that's really important to us as Latter-day Saints is like having an eternal perspective on things. Whether that's, having an eternal perspective on family, on, like the different things that happen in your life. So, For me, it was initially like a big struggle to not think that like law school was the end all be all. And like I said, and I'll continue to say, like at times that yes, I did feel consumed by it. And like it was like this like monster that was just eating up my time and the best years of my life. Um, but when I really stepped back and like took time away from it, like I was able to like more take it like an eternal perspective on it, that this is just like what I'm going to be doing now. And it's like, one, it's not forever. Two, it's also not the most important thing in my life. Like I continue to say, like my family and my faith are. Um, our faith too, and our church requires quite a bit of your time and your talents. Um, so there were always ample opportunities to step out of the student world, step out of like that like all-consuming like brain suck that law school can be, and to provide service, whether it was on Sundays, like teaching classes. Like I was able to teach some like classes to the youth at our church, to participate in like leading like our what we call our sacrament, but it's like our like large group meeting on Sunday mornings. The service throughout the week, generally on Saturdays, to individuals who like were not able-bodied or didn't have the means or the strength to like move things for themselves. Like I think of like during finals, there were some families in our ward that had babies, and somebody needed to spray their weeds. And like it fell to me, like I needed to go out, and I was spraying weeds for families every morning. One in particular, I remember before my con law final, I was like, oh, I can't go spray like XYZ family's weeds because like I had this con law final. And then I thought to myself, you know what, like why am I gonna allow, this like one test or this like circumstance to like affect how I'm gonna treat people and affect the way I'm gonna serve people? And it ended up working out. Like I woke up 30 minutes earlier that day, drove half a mile, sprayed this family's weeds, took a shower, and then I went and took my final. And it was just like all my other finals days. It's gonna be stressful. You're gonna be tired. It's gonna be hard. So you might as well do those other things that are important to you, in concert with them.
So how important, just for like your mental health, how important was it to be able to take a step back, so to take that internal perspective, or and be able to look around and be like, hey, you know what? Even as bad as it gets, it can't get that bad. It can't get much worse. How important was it to take a step back and gain that perspective?
Yeah, I like to think that it like having those opportunities to step out of that student world like kept me just a real person. And that's what I think. I'm glad that I had those opportunities to like reach out, help other people think about things other than like the slip and fall rules in McDonald's that I was learning in my torts class. Like there's I keep going back to the fact that like I just felt like law school could be all consuming. And if you don't have other things that you like make time for, then like there's a little bit of like, I don't want to call it like brain rot or brain decay, but just like a little bit of like a numbing to like real life if you allow it to happen.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more than that. More with that, quite honestly, because something like that, you talk about the brain decay, that sort of stuff. When you're consumed all by it, more often than not, as I've seen throughout this podcast, of people have told me throughout this podcast that it more than likely leads to someone just completely burning out and just, losing it all. And sort of just being completely burnt out. And so when you're constantly just reigniting that flame, making sure
Yeah.
that you're being a human being, is just the most important thing in the world. Because at the end of the day, it's just a grade, it's just a class. It's not that
Yeah.
big a deal. You move on, you go to the next day, and you keep living life. It's a beautiful thing. But
Yeah.
you were then a legal intern at Life Plan Legal AZ. Now, I ask about it. Can you talk about that experience? How was it? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you love it?
I loved it. I thought it was awesome. I was finishing up my time at ADP remotely and like just honestly looking for something to do in the summer. We had moved in with our in-laws as we moved from Utah when my wife graduated at Brigham Young University to Arizona, where we were ultimately enrolling in law school. And one thing you'll know about me is like I'm absolutely just shameless with like cold outreach. And a lot of that came from like ADP where like it was just entirely like self-generated business. Um and I was looking for a job. And so I just went on Google and I Googled like corporate lawyers, business lawyer, and like this zip code. And I called every single one of them. And Jake Carlson, who runs Life Plan Legal Arizona, his assistant Erica answered, and I gave like just a quick spiel of who I was, my background. He was like, "Cool, I'll tell Jake." And then like a day later, I got an email from the person at the front desk, and she said, "Hey, Jake likes your background. Send your resume and like show up tomorrow, and he'll just like see if he can stand to be around you." Um, and through no fault of my own and through no like credit, I can't give myself any credit for this, but like Jake and I are both members of the same church. We had both served our missions like 20 years apart in the same island chain in the Philippines. And then his office was like a mile, less than a mile from my in-laws house where I was crashing. So it was just this like convergence of like all these things at once. And he was like, yeah, I'll take this, I'll take a flyer on this cheap minimum wage like kid that's going to law school. And I think for him more than anything it was like, but like he was like doing a nice thing for somebody in need. And for me, I kind of got to peel back the curtain on like what it looked like to own and operate your own law firm.
Now, I have to ask, all those things you call you don't know you didn't know this guy previously, I'm assuming, right? Before you
Absolutely.
called him? No
I,
idea.
like I said, good business lawyer, zip code 85234, and I just called every single one of them.
Now, the fact that you had all those things in common, that you went to the same mission place, they were near your in-laws, they were part of the same church. What is that? I have to ask, what is that to you? Like, what is that? Why does it work like that?
I think if I was like in a church setting, I'd call it like divine design. I'd call it like a part of a plan. If I was in a professional setting, I'd call it luck. Uh, those are my answers for you. But I also think like if you don't have a forward center of mass, if you're not placing yourself in those situations, that's never going to happen to you.
So my follow-up question here, I like this. I like this. My follow-up question here is, how do you put yourself in the right position to be able to get some of that luck or the divine design, as you say?
The only way that you can do that is, and this is a stupid answer that I'm going to give you. The only way you can do it is by doing it.
Listen,
So if I want to find a job, if I want to find an attorney to give me a shot as like a pre-law student or like an enrolling 1L, the only way that they're going to find me is if I put myself out there. Unless my dad's a lawyer, unless my uncle's a lawyer, unless my neighbor's a lawyer. Like if you don't have those people that are like a phone call or a text away that you already know, then odds are you're going to have to find them.
I, of course, have to agree on all counts there. I mean, that's how I created this. It's how I
Yeah,
did this. You just got to put yourself out there continually, every day, every single week. Just make sure people know that the image of your face is in their head, to ensure that, you know what, one day they might reach out, they might give you that job, they might give you that position. You never know.
absolutely.
But how important to you is it to continually put yourself out there, to continually put yourself out there on the internet, be giving people great value, great insights about law school, being a law student, and handling all those things?
I think if you check out any of like the digital footprint that I have, like you'll see, and like I mentioned earlier, you'll find that I'm pretty shameless and like a bit of a shameless self-promoter for better or for worse. So obviously I think it's pretty important. And one of the ways that you like build a brand, one of the ways that you can start conversations, build relationships, um, and yeah, so it's like the only way to do it though is to do it.
As always, like we said before, the first thing, you just got to start. You just got to get on that computer,
Yeah,
or whatever notebook, whatever you may use, just start doing it. Now, let's talk about what you're doing today, what you're doing now. You're a Student Entrepreneurial Fellow at Tech Launch, Arizona. So, can you talk about what you've been doing since you started there and how it's been?
absolutely. So this was just another classic story where I was just like knocking doors, showing up to stuff. And fortunately for me, somebody opened a door for me. So in January, I started at Tech Launch Arizona. And here we work with like early and idea stage inventions, generally by University of Arizona faculty. Things that they come up with in a lab, things that they come up with funded by like their research budgets. And they want to either like turn it into like something that they're going to patent, they want to license it out to bigger companies. And a third and like less common, but still real way that they do it is to like actually create a startup out of it. So a lot of what I have done has been that third option in the actual like startup formation process. Um, and it really has been a blast to kind of peel back the curtain on like how companies, in this case it's mostly like life science companies, but how life science companies go from like idea to like IPO.
Now, a personal question, do you have any entrepreneurial aspirations yourself? And what are some things that you're learning from this experience that you think you would take away, maybe do for yourself?
Yeah, I definitely do have entrepreneurial aspirations. That's kind of one of the like considerations that I had in becoming an attorney. And I think it's just something that like keeps your options so open because you can really be like the owner and operator of a law firm of just about any kind of law once you pass the bar. Um, Here at Tech Launch, I'm learning like the importance of like adequate and informed counsel. Even at like the idea stage, like there's certain things you can and cannot do when, for example, your idea came from like a university budget. There's like everybody's got to get their cut, and somebody at every point has to draft the legal documents. Somebody's got to get paid. So that's like one of the market opportunities I'm identifying is like, looking with an eye toward the future is looking at like where an attorney fits in at every part of the process.
Well, I love to hear that. It's always important to have a vision of what the future may look like. And clearly, you're on the right track in finding that for you. And now, for a quick sidebar story that I actually wrote about in the last article that I just did,
Of
The
course.
Pillars of Podcasting. I don't know how I came up with that. I just thought it was funny. I wrote it out and I chuckled. I was like, oh, that's pretty
Yeah.
funny. And then
I
I
liked it. I liked it. I remember it.
and then I published it and I was like, oh my goodness, like now it's actually really funny. It's out there in the world. But
Yeah.
um, in doing that, one of the things before I even started this podcast, months before, a former guest, I was talking to former guest Nick Grande, and he was a good friend of mine from my hometown. And I was texting with him, and in that time, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the law, the sort of specialization. Am I going to do transactional? Am I going to be a trial lawyer, corporate lawyer? There's so many different things you could do. It's such an overwhelming thing to face up with. Now I have to ask, do you know what you want to do? Because when I asked Nick Grande, he was going into his third year. I'm like, oh, this guy's got to know. He's like, yeah, I have no idea. So, do you know what you want to do with the law?
Yeah. My answer right now is that I want to be a corporate attorney.
And go
If
ahead.
you ask for further explanation, I don't know if I could give you a much further explanation than that. Um, our and I say our because it's my wife and I that are like 100% and 100% on making this decision. Our kind of like biggest determining factor is like living and working in Phoenix because of like the depth of the family network and support that we have out there. Um, I know I want to work with businesses and I know I want to be like a corporate attorney, but what that means, I think will be a lot more informed by like the next, couple of months here at Tech Launch and like the next summer and beyond internships and externships that I have. Um, and maybe check back in 2026 and hopefully I'll have a better answer for you when I'm a 3L.
Oh, well, Spencer, that's exciting. You got ideas coming into my head right now of maybe we have Spencer May come back, talk about how he figured out what he wanted to do, or maybe what he didn't want to do. Maybe you go there, you have that experience, which people always talk about on this podcast, where they're like, oh, I want to be a trial lawyer. They go do some trial work. They're like, this sucks. I don't want to do this. And they sort of figure it out from there. Were there any influences, anything that influenced you to be like, oh, corporate law is something I may be interested in?
Yeah, definitely. So we already talked about those two public interest or public facing legal experiences I had. Those were confirmatory um, in the fact that I did want to be a lawyer. But there were certain things about like public work that were like unattractive to me. Um, at like the Disability Law Center and at the Utah County District Attorney's Office. And then when I married into my wife's family, who's a lot more entrepreneurial, a lot more business facing, I saw that as like a literal a perfect marriage. Um, where I could still, chase that dream of being an attorney, but also then like have access to or have an understanding of like what a business attorney does because my wife's dad and uncles at certain points have had to employ business attorneys. So those were questions that I was able to ask like, hey, blank, I want to be a lawyer. Like, what do you pay your lawyer for? What did they charge you? How much? Like, how frequently do you talk to your lawyer? What would you pay for? What wouldn't you pay for? Like at being able to ask those questions has been like really helpful along the way. Um, and they're also, again, like a phrase I always like is like peeling back the curtain because we'd like to live in that general like Chandler Mesa Gilbert area. They're doing business in the Chandler Mesa Gilbert area, and so are the attorneys that they employ.
Law students, are you feeling overwhelmed, stressed, or short on time in law school? Maybe you just want someone to show you a step-by-step framework to master the topics you're learning in your classes. I know the pressure you're under, and I've got the perfect solution for you. My course, The Law School Operating System, is proven to help you conquer law school with confidence and ease.
Created by Lisa Blasser, a former guest on the podcast and founder of the Law School Success Institute, this course breaks down every subject into manageable main topics that you run through a comprehensive study system to thoroughly prepare you for class and final exams. No more feeling like you need to know everything all at once in the beginning.
But that's not all, Nate. The Law School Operating System also teaches you how to schedule your studying and time effectively. For every topic, you'll know which study step you're on and when you'll complete it every week of your semester. No more mad dash cram sessions, more time with your loved ones. And with my system, you'll walk into your exams knowing you've given 100% of yourself, that there's nothing more you could have done to succeed, and there's no better confidence than that.
Lisa breaks it down like this: one class, one list of main topics, and one system to master each topic. With recorded and live sessions for students available on her website and partnerships with law schools nationwide, the Law School Operating System is here to help you thrive from day one to the final exam. Ready to take control of your law school journey and operate at your full potential in law school? Visit www.lisablasser.com today and enroll in the Law School Operating System. Be sure to use code LSOSNATE10 at checkout for 10% off the recorded course. That is code LSOSNATE10 at checkout. Now, back to the show. Well, listen, it sounds like you got a plan, and I love it so much. You're driven, you're ready to go, and you're figuring out what you need to do. And the most important thing is you're asking questions. You're always asking questions. It's always so important to ask questions. It's all I do all day on this podcast. I just ask questions. So
Yeah, you got to pick it out.
No, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that, Spencer. I barely have it figured out. Trust me, trust me. But Spencer, we're now down to our last 5 questions. The first of the 5 questions is an interesting one for you because you don't have sort of the practical law experience, or maybe not be practicing. I'm sorry. But
Go ahead.
may not be a practicing lawyer at the moment. You will be one day. You're getting there. But, and neither am I, say, but it is sort of the tech stack question per se. Now, you did talk about using Google Calendar and the things that you do to ensure that you're on top of everything in law school. So I guess I will pose the question in that way. What sorts of technologies, or maybe new software technologies or AI technologies, anything that you use throughout your day to ensure that you're organized on top of everything, sort of the tech stack question per se?
Yeah, my tech stack is like the most vanilla it could be. It is just like Google Workspace. There are so many powerful tools that like I don't think the average consumer knows that are available to them for free in the Google tech stack. So whether that's Google Docs, whether that's Google Calendar, Google Meet, Google Keep, which is just like basically like a to-do list platform. And I'm embarrassed to say it, but I figured out pretty quickly that you can find out just about anything on like TikTok or Instagram Reels or Twitter or YouTube. And so when I realized it was nice as a student to use like the premium Google Workspace that like every school should provide, I would assume. Then I was just on TikTok like best Google Calendar features, best Google ABC features, and like there was so much out there that it's been really nice.
Oh, it's the beautiful power of the internet. I love hearing that more than anything. Everything that I've ever discovered in my life, I just looked it up on YouTube or looked it up on Google or looked it up. I've never used TikTok before, but now I'll be using TikTok just like you, Spencer, because I think it's such an amazing thing. It is the power of the internet. There's actually an overwhelming amount of information out there. You
Oh
just got
yeah.
to go find it. So I've never heard of Google Keep actually, which is so funny because I use Google for everything. I use Docs, I use Calendar just like yourself. But now I got a new little tool now that I get to use. Very happy about that. Before the last question here, Spencer, live on the Lawyers in the Making podcast, what are your book recommendations for people? Doesn't have to be about the law, just some of your favorite books you've ever read in your life, something you give a gift to someone.
Sure, a couple of them, and I'm funny that you say like they don't have to be legal or lawyer related. I would say a lot of mine are like personal finance facing because like there's not a lot of dialogue for attorneys when we're learning like the slip and fall rules in McDonald's in our torts class or when we're learning like the federal rules of civil procedure. Um, so the first book that was recommended to me that I feel like is foundational was like Millionaire Next Door. There's an entire chapter in there about how lawyers and doctors will never make or keep a significant amount of money, as opposed to like the plumbers and like the HVAC contractors, which was kind of like a punch in the gut. Um, I then had somebody recommend to me who said, if you like Millionaire Next Door, you should read The White Coat Investor. So that's another one that's like specifically tailored for doctors and residents. But all the same advice applies to like lawyers. Um, and the final book that I can think of, probably one of the more like transformational and inspiring books that I read is a fiction book called The Alchemist.
Oh my goodness. You, oh, I can't believe you said that. That's my second favorite book of all time. I love that book more than anything on this world. I think it's amazing. I think it goes back to what you were saying before. And were you reading it? Now, this is funny. Ready? I'm going to connect it all. It's like a beautiful
Okay.
web. When you were reading that, I'm guessing that you were going through getting the legal intern at Life Plan Legal when everything was just shaping up that you were part of the same church, that you're at the same mission, and it's the alchemist. You were finding
Right.
all those little things, those little omens, and you were following them. And you're like, oh, look at this, another thing, another. I see it. Am I correct? Tell me I'm correct.
Yes, and I was literally walking through the desert in Arizona.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I could talk about The Alchemist for hours and hours.
Yeah,
It just like myself, it was such a transformational book for me. It honestly just changed my perspective on everything and it just makes you see the world in such a beautiful way. When you see these little omens, you see these little things that go on. You just it's that hero's journey that you're following.
yeah,
Oh, I like I said, I could go on. I could spend the next 4 hours talking about how wonderful that book is. I can't recommend it more for everyone out there because it is just it and it just the thing it's so simple. Like it's literally reads like a children's book,
yeah, it
but
does.
there's so much. It's just so powerful. It really, really is. I can't believe you said that. It's such a wonderful book.
Yeah.
But third to last question here. What are the types of things that you consume, not food, on a daily basis? Either that be through social media. You said before you use TikTok, you use Instagram Reels. So like TikTok, Instagram Reels, Twitter, LinkedIn. Some people on LinkedIn that you could recommend. Any Substacks that you follow, Reddit. I said YouTube already. Some people use Facebook. Any podcasts you listen to that you love. What is crossing the transom of Spencer's mind on a daily basis?
Yeah, yeah, I'll give you a couple and I'll just go like chronologically throughout the day. Um, First and foremost, like for just like general like news, for me, I do like a morning brew daily, which
Oh,
is just like a podcast on Spotify. I feel like it's like Gen Z's like news podcast. Gives like a good kind of mix of like general political, business, whatever news. It's just kind of like a nice morning scoop without having to listen to like talk radio.
I love
Um,
I love Mr. Lieberman, but keep going.
yeah, so it fits into my commute to and from either school or the office. Um, Throughout the day, yeah, of course, I'm on LinkedIn probably more than I should be. A couple of people that I think are really good follows, especially for incoming 1Ls, are going to be like the classics, like Amanda Haverstick, who gives really helpful legal writing tips. Another name that I found really helpful was every Wednesday, Melanie Kalmanson, I think is her name, gives out like blue book tips, which is just like it's literally a foreign language that you have to learn in your first year of law school. Like I didn't until August of 2023, I didn't know what a blue book was. Um, Now almost in August of 2024, I don't know what a blue book is, but I know how to use it. And that's thanks to some practical tips from Melanie Colmanson, and a third that's a little more practical and business facing for me, so it might not apply for those that are not interested in like corporate work. Um, are the SMB Law Group guys, which is like Kevin Henderson and Eric Pacifici, however you pronounce the name correctly. Um, who were like they seem like real guys who do real legal work with real people in like that lower middle market mergers and acquisitions group, working with like the boring millionaire next door companies. It's like inspirational to me. I'm like, sometimes I think to myself, maybe I should just be an SMB law guy and sail off into the sunset in the
Oh,
future.
I love those SMB law guys. I've actually before I even started the podcast, like almost like 2 years ago, I've been following specifically Eric for so long. Like I
Yeah.
don't even know how I started following him, but I've seen him on my Twitter for so long, and he's been really amazing. And I love reading his stuff because, like you said, he's a real guy doing real business, and I'm always interested in what he's talking about. Another guy, Scott Oliver, he's also in that SMB
Yeah.
space, previous
Yeah.
guest on the podcast. So shout out him, of course, amazing human being. It was great talking to him. But second to last question here, Spencer, you got your family, got your friends. So what does an ideal Friday night and Sunday morning look for Spencer?
So Friday night and Sunday morning?
Yes.
Okay. So Friday night, I think an ideal Friday night in the May house um, is that we will, especially if it's the first Friday of the month, which is something we've kept to um, every first Friday in 2024, is we will select a new pizza place that we're going to go to in usually in Tucson or wherever we're at. This past week it was in Newport Beach, and it was Mario's. If anybody's been to Mario's in Newport Beach, shout out Mario's. Um, but an ideal Friday night is, yeah, loading our 9-month-old up in the car, driving to the pizza place, watching him throw food around for the entire time, talking, debriefing from the week, spending quality time together, coming home, bath time. Like I said, like this is not like the typical 25-year-old's like ideal Friday night, but it's, yeah, bath time, bottle, sleep, and then some like true crime show that my wife's into on TV, that I like to like half sleep, half watch.
And the Sunday morning, what does it look like?
Again, this is like not, this might be atypical, but like our church actually is at 9 in the morning, which is really hard with a 9-month-old. So we wake up, I mean, every day at like he's our alarm clock. Um, right at 7 o'clock. Somebody's feeding a bottle, somebody's getting the dry food ready for some snacks beforehand, alternating showering and dressing him, dressing ourselves, running to church, worshiping, talking to people, kind of like having that quiet time. And then if I can help it, and if Hank, that's our 9-month-old, if Hank will go down, then I get a nap. I'll take a
Ah,
nap. Sunday
they
night.
a dual nap. I love to hear that. I mean, it may not be atypical, but it sounds like a beautiful life you're living, and it sounds like something I'd aspire to want to feel and do myself. So even
Come
if
on over, bro.
oh,
I'll
trust
send you the
me,
address.
soon enough. Trust me, I'm going to Arizona soon. I'll be out there soon, so don't worry, Spencer. But
Text me.
final question, last question. I do this at the end of every single episode. Spencer, May, live on the Lawyers in the Making podcast, what are your words of wisdom for the aspiring law students, the current law students, and even the legal professionals. Everyone can get some words of wisdom.
Yeah, I'll give a quick like elevator pitch for those exploring or headed into like the law school journey. Before you enroll, before you do that LSAT undertaking, talk with people that have done it and are currently doing it. Some of the best advice I got was from somebody out in DC at the political action community or committee that I worked at, who said like I seriously regret going to law school because I never had intentions of being a lawyer. So his advice and my advice would be, if you're going to go to law school, make sure you want to be a lawyer. Obviously, there's those other career paths that open up, but more likely than not, if you go to law school, you're going to be a lawyer for the rest of your life to be paying off like those financial burdens that you take on. Not to mention like the physical and mental load that are required of you to do that. But if you can have those conversations, get yourself in those rooms and open those doors, then it can be a really inspiring and a really fulfilling journey that you get to participate in.
Well, Spencer, beautifully said. Just got to start. Put yourself out there. It's the most important thing in the world. And those doors will open. Those omens will come to you, as the alchemist may say.
Yeah.
But that is the episode. That is the pod. So, Spencer, thanks so much for coming on here, spreading your wisdom, spreading your experiences. And for everyone out there listening, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check us out. Lawyersinthemaking.substack.com. Lawyers in the Making, one word, one singular word, .substack.com. And I will see you all in the next one.